3 nights after the queen's burial, guards found a small human girl sitting beside the sealed coffin, refusing to leave. The vampire king grabbed her wrist to remove her, then froze. On her skin was a blood sigil only he and his dead wife had ever used, and the child whispered words only the queen should know. The guards found her on the 3rd night. A small human child, no older than 7, sitting cross-legged beside the queen's coffin. Her hands rested palm up on her knees like she was meditating. The royal crypt was sealed with blood magic strong enough to burn through bone, yet somehow she sat there untouched, humming a melody no one had heard in centuries. "Step away from the coffin," Commander Vale ordered, his hand on his sword. 3 other guards flanked him, crossbows loaded with iron bolts. "This is your only warning." The girl didn't flinch. She looked up with eyes too calm for a child surrounded by armed vampires. "I was told to wait here." "Told by whom?" Vale stepped closer, his patience wearing thin. They'd been guarding this crypt day and night since the queen's burial. No living thing should have made it past the outer wards, let alone a fragile human child. By her, the girl pointed at the massive stone coffin behind her. Moonlight from the high windows caught the silver inlay of the queen's name, Alara, beloved of the night.
Valse av Titaned.
"The queen is dead. She tells no one anything." "Not anymore," the girl agreed. "But she told me before. She said when I got scared, I should come here and wait. So I did." One of the younger guards shifted nervously. "Commander, should we?" "Fetch the king," Vale interrupted, his eyes never leaving the child.
Now.
The guard disappeared in a blur of supernatural speed. The girl went back to humming. Alaric arrived within minutes, his black cloak billowing behind him like a storm cloud. He hadn't slept since the funeral. Couldn't sleep, not with his wife's absence filling every corner of the castle like a scream. His eyes were bloodshot, his movements sharp with barely controlled rage. "What is this?" His voice echoed off the stone walls. "A trespasser, your majesty," Vale said. "Human. She won't leave the queen's coffin." Alaric's gaze locked onto the small figure. She was thin, dressed in a simple gray dress that had seen better days. Her hair was dark and tangled, her feet bare. She looked like any street orphan from the lower city, except for the way she sat there, unafraid, as if she belonged. "How did you get in here?" Alaric demanded. "I walked," the girl said simply. "Past 6 locked gates? Through wards designed to kill intruders." Alaric moved closer, his supernatural speed making him appear directly in front of her in the space of a blink. "Try again." The girl tilted her head, studying him with an expression that made Alaric's skin prickle. It was the same look Alara used to give him when he was being stubborn, patient, knowing, slightly amused. "The gates opened," she said. "The wards didn't hurt me. I don't know why. I just knew I had to come here, so I did." Alaric grabbed her wrist to pull her away from the coffin. He froze. On the inside of her arm, barely visible in the dim light, was a mark. A blood sigil, traced in dark red lines that pulsed faintly with magical energy. The pattern was complex, old magic, forbidden magic. The kind only royalty knew. The kind that only he and Alara had ever used. His grip loosened, but he didn't let go. "Where did you get this?" The girl looked down at the mark as if noticing it for the first time. "I've always had it. It glows sometimes when I'm dreaming." "That's impossible," Alaric's voice dropped to barely a whisper. His fingers traced the edges of the sigil. Every curve, every symbol, it was exact. Perfect. The same binding spell he and Alara had cast together years ago, the night before the war reached their borders. The night before everything fell apart. "Did she send you?" The question came out before Alaric could stop it. The girl's expression softened. "I think so. In my dreams, there's a woman with kind eyes. She shows me places. Tells me things. Last week, she showed me this room and said, 'When you're ready, go there. Wait for him. He'll understand.'" Vale stepped forward, concern clear on his face. "Your Majesty, this could be a trick. Dark magic designed to." "Leave us," Alaric said. My lord. Everyone out.
Now.
The guards hesitated only a second before bowing and retreating. The heavy door sealed behind them with a resonant boom. Alaric knelt in front of the girl, bringing himself to her eye level. Up close, he could see other things he'd missed: the shape of her jaw, the curve of her nose. Features that echoed someone he'd loved with every fiber of his being. What's your name? I don't have one, the girl said. At the orphanage, they just called me Seven. I was the seventh one they found that month. How old are you? 6, maybe? I don't remember much from before the orphanage. Just the dreams. She paused, her small hand reaching out to touch the blood sigil on her own arm. And this. I remember someone holding my hand really tight and saying, "I'll always find you." Was that her? Alaric's throat tightened. Those were Alara's exact words the night of the ritual. The night she'd placed her hand over her pregnant belly and promised their unborn child protection, no matter what happened. The night he'd thought he'd lost them both. Yes, he whispered. That was her. Alaric stood abruptly, his mind racing through impossibilities. He paced the length of the crypt, his boots echoing against ancient stone, while the girl, Seven, watched him with that unervingly patient gaze. The binding spell, he said, more to himself than to her. It was meant to shield the child, to keep the bloodline alive even if he couldn't finish the sentence. Even now, 3 days after burying an empty vessel, saying it aloud felt like tearing open a fresh wound. Even if she died? Seven finished quietly. Alaric spun to face her. How do you know that? The dreams tell me things. Seven traced the sigil on her arm absently. Sometimes I see a big room with red curtains. A man and a woman standing in a circle of candles. The woman is crying, but she's smiling too. She keeps saying, "Our daughter will live. No matter what, she will live." Alaric's hands clenched into fists. That room. Those words. He'd replayed that night 1,000 times in his mind, wondering if he'd done something wrong, if there was a different choice he could have made. That ritual was never completed, he said. The enemy attacked at dawn. Alara was, he swallowed hard. She was killed before we could finish the spell. I felt the child's heartbeat stop with hers. Maybe it didn't stop, Seven said. Maybe it just moved. The simplicity of her words hit like a physical blow. Alaric crossed the distance between them in 2 strides and knelt again, this time studying the sigil with the intensity of a scholar examining ancient texts. The mark was alive. He could feel it pulsing in rhythm with the girl's heartbeat. But there was something else, something woven into the spell's foundation that made his breath catch. "Give me your other arm," he commanded, his voice rough. Seven extended her left arm without hesitation. Alaric pushed up the sleeve of her dress. There, mirror image to the first sigil, was another mark. But this one was different. Older. The lines were faded, breaking apart like cracks in dried earth. As he watched, one of the connecting symbols flickered and went dark. "It's dying," he whispered. "I know," Seven said calmly. "It started fading after I came here. It used to glow bright enough to read by at night. Now it barely lights up at all." Alaric's mind worked through the implications. A dual-bound spell. One mark to protect, one mark to guide. Alara must have poured the last of her strength into splitting the enchantment, giving their child a way to survive beyond her own death. But that meant, "You're not just carrying a protection spell," Alaric said slowly. "You're carrying part of her soul." Seven's eyes widened slightly, the first real emotion she'd shown. "Is that why I hear her voice?" "What does she say?" "Lots of things. Warnings, mostly. Don't trust the man with the silver ring. Stay away from the East Tower. Last month, she told me to leave the orphanage and start walking north. She said I'd know when to stop." Seven looked toward the coffin. "I stopped here." Alaric followed her gaze. The coffin sat massive and silent, wrapped in preservation spells strong enough to last centuries. Inside lay what remained of his wife, or what he'd thought remained. Now, standing in front of a child who carried Alara's soul fragment, who knew things only Alara could know, he wondered if he'd buried anything at all except his own grief. "The woman in your dreams," he said carefully. Does she ever mention me? Seven nodded. She calls you her stubborn king. She says you blame yourself for things that weren't your fault. She says the girl hesitated, her confidence wavering for the first time. She says you need to let her go so she can rest. But she can't rest until she knows I'm safe. The words landed like arrows, each one finding its mark with devastating accuracy. Alaric had spent 3 days drowning in guilt, replaying every decision, every moment he could have acted differently. He'd kept Alara's coffin under constant guard not just to protect her memory, but because letting go meant accepting he'd failed her. I don't know if I can keep you safe, he admitted, the honesty burning in his throat. The kingdom is fractured. Half the council wants war, the other half wants surrender. Hunters circle our borders like wolves. And inside these walls, he paused, choosing his words carefully. Not everyone would see you as the miracle you are. They'd see me as a threat, Seven said with that eerie understanding. Yes, because I'm human. Because you're proof that royal vampire magic can live in human blood. There are those who would kill to possess that power, and those who would kill to destroy it. Seven absorbed this information with the same strange calm she'd shown since the guards found her. Then she stood, brushed the dust from her dress, and placed one small hand on the cold stone of the coffin. She knew they'd come for me, Seven said quietly. That's why she hid me in a human orphanage. That's why she only spoke to me in dreams. She was protecting me from the very people who should have protected me themselves. Alaric rose to his full height, a decision crystallizing in his mind like ice. Then I'll finish what she started. The memory hit Alaric without warning. 5 years ago, the night everything changed. He was standing in the ritual chamber again, the air thick with incense and magic. Candles formed a perfect circle around them, 13 flames for 13 centuries of royal bloodline. Alara stood across from him, one hand pressed against her swollen belly, the other extended toward his. Are you certain? He'd asked, though he already knew her answer. Alara was always certain. The scouts report enemy forces will reach us by dawn, she'd said. Her voice was steady, but he could see the fear in her eyes. Not for herself. Never for herself. If they break through our defenses, if they reach the castle. They won't. Alaric had gripped her hand tighter, feeling the warmth of her skin against his cold palm. I'll die before I let them touch you. That's exactly what I'm afraid of. Alara's free hand had moved in a complex pattern, drawing symbols in the air that glowed like embers. This spell will anchor our child's soul to the bloodline itself. Not to me, not to you, but to the essence of what we are. If we fall, she survives. The magic will find her a vessel, a way to live. You're talking about soul transference, Alaric had said, his stomach turning. That's forbidden magic, Alara. The cost is worth it. Her eyes had blazed with fierce determination. I won't let our daughter die because we were too afraid to break old rules. The ritual had taken hours. They'd spoken words in the old tongue, cut their palms and let their blood mix in a silver bowl, traced matching sigils on their wrists that burned like brands. With each step, Alaric had felt the magic building, thrumming through his veins like a second heartbeat. The spell needs an anchor point, Alara had explained, her face pale from magical exhaustion. Somewhere our daughter can find her way back to us if she gets lost. Somewhere she'll instinctively know is safe. Here, Alaric had said immediately. The royal crypt, protected by layers of ancient magic, accessible only to true blood. Alara had nodded, adding that final component to the spell. Her hands had moved faster now, weaving the enchantment into something living, something that could think and adapt and protect. Then she'd stopped abruptly, swaying on her feet. What's wrong? Alaric had caught her before she fell. The baby, Alara had gasped. She's coming.
Now.
The magic, it's triggering the birth. Panic had clawed at Alaric's throat. You said we had another month. The spell is accelerating everything. We need to finish the ritual before. The alarm bells had shattered the night. Alaric could still hear them, still feel the way his blood had turned to ice. The enemy wasn't supposed to arrive until dawn. They'd come early. Somehow, they'd known. Go, Alara had commanded, pushing him toward the door, even as she doubled over in pain. Defend the castle. I'll complete the ritual. I won't leave you. You have to. She'd grab his face with both hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. I can finish this alone. But if they breach the inner walls, if they reach this chamber before the spell is set, none of it matters. Our daughter needs you to buy me time. Alaric had hesitated, torn between duty and love, between kingdom and family. Go! Alara had screamed, and the raw command in her voice had propelled him through the door. He'd fought like a demon that night. Cut down enemies until his sword arm went numb, held choke points with nothing but rage and desperation. But there were too many of them. Wave after wave of vampire hunters, armed with iron and fire and blessed silver. When the eastern wall fell, Alaric had known. He'd abandoned his position, racing back toward the ritual chamber, his mind screaming denials with every step. She'd be fine. She had to be fine. The spell would protect her. The chamber door had been blown open. Inside, Alara lay in a pool of blood, her eyes already glazing. The silver bowl was shattered. The candles extinguished. The ritual circle broken. And in her arms, wrapped in a blood-soaked blanket, was their daughter.
Blue. Silent. Gone.
Alaric had dropped to his knees beside them, his hands shaking as he checked for a pulse, for breath, for any sign of life. Nothing. The spell had failed. They were both dead. He'd cradled Alara's body and screamed until his voice broke. Your Majesty? Alaric blinked, the memory dissolving like smoke. He was back in the crypt, back in the present, with Seven watching him with those two knowing eyes. You saw her die, Seven said softly. It wasn't a question. Yes. And you saw the baby die too. Yes, the word came out as barely a whisper. Seven reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were warm, impossibly warm for someone in a cold crypt. The spell worked, she said. You just didn't understand how. She pushed the soul out before the body died. She saved me the only way she could. Alaric looked down at their joined hands, at the matching blood sigils that bound them across time and death and impossible magic. The ritual was never meant to protect a body, he realized. It was meant to save a soul. And souls, Seven said, can always find new homes. The throne room filled as the sun rose, though no light penetrated the heavy curtains. Alaric sat rigid on his throne, Seven standing beside him like a small shadow. Around them, the kingdom's most powerful minds gathered, scholars, mages, military advisors, and council members who hadn't slept since receiving the king's urgent summons. Master Torvin, the eldest mage, approached first. His silver beard touched the floor as he bowed. Your Majesty, we came as quickly as possible. The message said you'd found something.
Impossible.
I found my daughter, Alaric said flatly. The room went silent. Council member Drace, a vampire who'd served the crown for 6 centuries, stepped forward. His face was carefully neutral. Your Majesty, with respect, the princess died 5 years ago. We all mourned. Look at her arm. Alaric gestured to Seven, who obediently held out her wrist. The blood sigil glowed faintly in the dim room, its pattern unmistakable. Torvin's eyes widened. He moved closer, his gnarled hands hovering over the mark without touching it. Royal binding magic. But this is the protection spell you and Queen Alara cast the night of the attack. Exactly. Impossible, Drace said sharply. That ritual was never completed. The Queen died before. The Queen completed it perfectly, Alaric interrupted, his voice cold. We simply didn't understand what she'd accomplished. Scholar Mira, a specialist in ancient magic, pushed through the crowd. She was younger than most in the room, but her reputation was formidable. May I examine the child? Alaric nodded. Mira circled Seven slowly, her eyes cataloging every detail. She pulled out a small crystal that glowed when near magical signatures, holding it close to Seven's skin. The crystal blazed white-hot. Remarkable, Mira whispered. The magic isn't just on her, it's woven through her entire being. Cellular-level integration. And there's something else. She moved the crystal to Seven's chest, above her heart. A secondary signature. Faint, but distinctly royal. Distinctly feminine. The Queen's soul fragment, Alaric confirmed. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. That's necromancy, someone shouted from the back. It's survival, Alaric corrected coldly. My wife found a way to save our child when everything else had failed. Torvin stroked his beard, his expression troubled. Your Majesty, soul transference is forbidden for good reason. The host body often rejects the foreign soul. Madness, physical deterioration, violent outbursts. I feel fine, Seven said, speaking for the first time since entering the throne room. Her small voice carried clearly in the sudden silence. I'm not mad. I'm not sick. I'm just me. Tell them, Alaric commanded gently. Tell them what you know. Seven took a breath. There's a hidden passage behind the Western Library. It leads to an old wine cellar that no one uses anymore. When Queen Alara was young, she used to hide there when she was sad. Myra's face went pale. How could you possibly? The Queen's private study has a loose floorboard under the window, Seven continued. She kept letters there from before she married the king. Love letters from someone else. She never threw them away because they reminded her that being loved was possible, even when she felt alone. Drace took a step back. No one knew about those letters. I helped her hide them myself when she first arrived at the castle. She used to sing a lullaby, Seven said, her voice taking on a melodic quality. Old words, from before the kingdom existed. It went like this. She began to hum, then sing softly in a language that predated modern vampire tongue. Alaric's chest tightened. He knew that song. Alara had sung it to their unborn child every night, her hand on her belly, her voice filled with hope and love and dreams of a future they'd never gotten to see. That's the Queen's private lullaby, Torvin said, his voice shaking. She told me once her mother taught it to her. Only she and the king ever heard it in this castle. And me, Seven said simply. She sang it in my dreams. Scholar Mira knelt in front of Seven, her scientific detachment cracking. Child, what else do you remember? What else has she shown you? Seven's eyes grew distant. Secret passages. Hidden chambers. The face of the person who betrayed them the night of the attack. Someone inside the castle who gave the hunters the defense schedules. Her gaze snapped to focus, landing on someone in the middle of the crowd. Someone with a silver ring shaped like a serpent. Every eye in the room followed her stare. Captain Hadrian stood frozen, his right hand instinctively moving to cover the ring on his left. This is absurd. The child is obviously a plant, trained to say these things. Then explain the blood sigil, Alaric said quietly. Explain how a human orphan carries royal magic that only my wife and I could cast. Dark magic has many forms. Explain how she knows the lullaby. Hadrian's jaw clenched. This proves nothing. It proves, Alaric said, rising from his throne, that my daughter survived, and that she's been guided here by the very woman some of you failed to protect. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Drace cleared his throat. Your Majesty, assuming this child is who you claim, what do you intend to do with her? Alaric looked down at Seven, small, calm, impossibly brave. I intend, he said, to finish what my wife started. The council chamber was colder than the throne room, its walls lined with ancient stone that had witnessed centuries of difficult decisions. 12 high-backed chairs formed a semicircle around a central floor where accused and petitioners stood for judgment. Alaric had dismissed everyone except the core council members, the voices that truly mattered in matters of law and succession. Seven stood in the center of the floor, small and solitary. Alaric had offered to stand beside her, but she'd shaken her head. I need to do this alone, she'd said with that unsettling maturity. So he sat in his chair, fingers digging into the armrests, watching every face for signs of mercy or malice. Council member Drace spoke first. We've examined the evidence. The blood sigil is genuine. The child's knowledge is troubling in its accuracy. But that doesn't change certain fundamental realities. Such as, Alaric's voice was dangerously quiet. She's human, Lady Seraphine said from her seat. Her voice was soft, but her words cut like glass. A human child carrying a fragment of vampire royal soul. That alone violates 3 separate accords from the Treaty of Nightfall. The treaty was written to prevent forced soul transfer, Master Torvin interjected. To stop vampires from possessing humans as eternal hosts. This situation is entirely different. Is it? Lord Cashin leaned forward, his angular face sharp with concern. A vampire soul in a human body. How long before that soul tries to dominate? How long before the child becomes something neither human nor vampire, but a threat to both? She's 6 years old, Alaric said through clenched teeth. She's a hybrid abomination, Drace countered bluntly. I speak harsh truths because someone must. The other clans are already suspicious of our weakened state. If word spreads that we're harboring a forbidden vessel, a living violation of ancient law, they'll have the excuse they need to attack. Seraphine nodded. The Bloodmoon clan has been testing our borders for weeks. The Shadowfang are in open rebellion in the north. We cannot afford to appear weak or lawless. So you'd kill a child to maintain appearances? Alaric's hands blazed with barely controlled power, frost forming on the metal armrests. We'd prevent a war, Drace said. 1 child's life against thousands. It's mathematics, Your Majesty. Cold, but necessary. Seven remained perfectly still through all of this, her expression unreadable. Alaric wanted to grab her, to run, to tear apart anyone who threatened her. But he forced himself to stay seated, to let the council speak. They needed to reveal themselves fully before he could counter. There's another concern, Lord Cashin said carefully. The soul fragment is fading. Scholar Mira confirmed it. What happens when it's gone completely? Does the child remain your daughter, or does she become just another human orphan with fading magic? She is my daughter regardless of the soul fragment, Alaric said firmly. Legally she isn't, Seraphine said, not unkindly. Your daughter died 5 years ago. This child may carry her essence, but essence is an identity under kingdom law. You have no heir, Your Majesty. Acknowledging this child changes nothing about succession. The words hit like physical blows. Master Torvin raised his hand. I must disagree. If the princess's soul survived in any form, that creates precedent. The child isn't just a vessel, she's a continuation of the royal bloodline through extraordinary means. Magical loopholes don't change biology, Drace said harshly. The girl is human. She'll age normally, die normally. What happens in 60 years when she's elderly and the kingdom still needs a vampire heir? We'll be right back where we started, but weaker. Unless we act now, Cashin said quietly. The room went cold. Act how? Alaric asked, though he already knew. Drace stood, his formal robes rustling. The council has discussed this. We propose a mercy execution. Quick, painless. We honor the child as a vessel of the Queen's final gift, then release both the fragment and the girl peacefully. Before the hunters detect her. Before the other clans hear rumors. Before this becomes a crisis we cannot contain. You're describing murder, Alaric said, ice forming on the floor around his chair. We're describing Triab, Drace countered. Your Majesty, we understand this is painful, but you've been compromised by grief. You're seeing your wife and daughter in this child because you want them back.
We all want them back.
But we cannot build policy on wishes. The hunters are already moving, Seraphine added. Our scouts report unusual activity on the eastern border. They're sniffing something. If they trace it here, then we fight, Alaric interrupted. We're not strong enough, Cashin said flatly. Not yet. We need time to rebuild our forces, to secure alliances. This child, he gestured to Seven. She's a beacon for every enemy we have, human and vampire alike. Seven finally spoke, her voice clear and calm. How long do I have? The council members exchanged glances. We propose execution at midnight tonight, Drace said. Before the moon rises. It's the most auspicious time for releasing souls. 13 hours, Seven said, processing this like someone discussing the weather. She looked up at Alaric. What will you do? Every council member turned to face the king. Alaric stood slowly, power radiating from him like heat from a forge. I will give you until tomorrow at dawn to reconsider. One day. Use it to find your conscience or prepare your defenses, because if you come for this child, you come through me. Your Majesty. This council is dismissed. 50 miles east, where the forest grew dense and the old roads crumbled into memory, Marcus Thorne knelt beside a stream and washed blood from his hands. The water ran red, then pink, then clear. Behind him, his hunting party set up camp, 20 men and women, each carrying enough blessed silver and consecrated iron to kill a dozen vampires. But they weren't after vampires. Not exactly. Found another marker. His lieutenant, Sarah, called from the tree line. She held up a piece of cloth, gray and worn. Child-sized. Same direction as the others. Marcus dried his hands and walked over. The cloth still held traces of magical residue. He could feel it tingling against his skin like static electricity. He brought it to his nose. Beneath the dirt and forest decay, there was something else. Something that made his pulse quicken. Royal blood, he said quietly. Sarah's eyes widened. The queen's been dead for 5 years. Not the queen. Marcus folded the cloth carefully, tucking it into his pack. Something carrying the queen's essence. Moving north, toward the capital. He looked up at the darkening sky. We've been tracking this signature for 3 weeks. Whatever it is, it's getting stronger. Or we're getting closer, Sarah suggested. Marcus nodded. 3 weeks ago, every hunter within 100 miles had felt it, a pulse of magical energy unlike anything in recent memory. Not vampire, not human, but something caught between. The signal had been faint at first, easy to ignore. But then it had flared, bright and unmistakable, like a beacon designed to be seen. The Council of Hunters had convened within days. Arguments had raged for hours about what the signature meant, where it originated, whether it was trap or opportunity. In the end, Marcus had volunteered to lead the investigation. He'd been hunting vampires for 20 years. He knew their magic like he knew his own heartbeat. This was different. How many days to the capital? He asked.
3 if we push hard, Sarah said.
2 if we don't sleep. Marcus considered. 2 days ago, they'd found the orphanage, a small, struggling building on the edge of a forgotten town. The headmistress had been surprisingly forthcoming once Marcus showed her his hunter's seal. Yes, they had a strange girl. No name, no history. She'd lived there for years, quiet and unremarkable, until one morning they'd woken to find her gone. She'd just walked out, the headmistress had said, wringing her hands. No note, no warning. But the strangest thing, her bed was covered in frost. In the middle of summer, vampire magic. Royal vampire magic, specifically. The kind that manifested in temperature changes and physical phenomena. But the girl was human. They'd confirmed it with every test, every examination. Human heartbeat, human blood, human limitations. Yet somehow, she'd been carrying a magical signature powerful enough to register across vast distances. We need to move faster, Marcus decided. Break camp in an hour. We travel through the night. The men are exhausted. The men will rest when we understand what we're chasing. Marcus pulled out a map, spreading it on a flat rock. His finger traced the path north. She's heading straight for the vampire capital. Not wandering, not hiding. Moving with purpose. Like she knows exactly where she's going. Sarah peered at the map. You think she's being summoned? I think she's being called home. Marcus tapped the castle's location. The question is, why now? The queen died 5 years ago. King Alaric has been in mourning ever since, barely holding his kingdom together. If he had a secret weapon, why wait this long to use it? Maybe he didn't know about it. Marcus considered that. It was possible. Vampire magic could be unpredictable, especially the old forbidden spells. Soul transference, blood binding, essence preservation, the kind of magic the royal families swore they'd abandoned centuries ago. If Alaric has found a way to bring back the queen, Sarah let the thought trail off. He hasn't, Marcus said firmly. You can't resurrect the dead, but you can preserve pieces. Fragments. Memories stored in magical constructs. He looked at the cloth again, at the faint shimmer of power still clinging to it. What if Queen Alara didn't die completely? What if she found a way to anchor part of herself to something, or someone else? Sarah's hand moved to the iron blade at her hip. A human vessel carrying vampire royalty. That's forbidden magic. That's grounds for destroying the entire vampire kingdom, Marcus finished. The Treaty of Nightfall is explicit. Sole possession of humans is punishable by total annihilation. If we can prove Alaric is harboring a possessed vessel, every hunter in the continent will march on that castle. Marcus rolled up the map, his jaw set. For 20 years, he'd fought vampires in the shadows, small skirmishes, isolated attacks, endless games of cat and mouse. But this was different. This was the kind of violation that could unite all the scattered hunter factions. This was the kind of opportunity that came once in a generation. Send word to the council, he ordered. Tell them we've confirmed the signature is heading to the vampire capital. Tell them we believe King Alaric is sheltering a forbidden vessel in direct violation of the treaty. And if we're wrong? Marcus looked at her coldly. We're not wrong. I can feel it. Whatever that child is, she's the key to ending this. He turned toward the camp, his voice carrying to the entire hunting party. Pack up. We move in 1 hour. Whoever reaches that castle first, us or understanding, decides whether the vampire kingdom stands or falls. Midnight came with a weight that pressed against the castle walls like a living thing. Alaric stood alone in the royal crypt, torches casting dancing shadows across stone that had housed the dead for 1,000 years. Seven was safely hidden in his private chambers, guarded by the only soldiers he still trusted completely. The council had grudgingly agreed to his 1-day extension, but the clock was ticking. 13 hours until dawn. 13 hours to find proof that would change their minds. He approached Alara's coffin slowly, each step an act of will. For 3 days, he'd avoided this. Avoided confronting the finality of it, the crushing reality that she was gone. But Seven's existence changed everything. If his daughter had survived in a way he didn't understand, then perhaps. I need to know, he whispered to the silent stone. I need to see what you really did. His hands trembled as he placed them on the coffin's seal. The magic resisted immediately. Preservation spells designed to last centuries, protection wards that would burn anyone with ill intent. But he was the king. He'd helped craft these very enchantments. Forgive me, my love, he said, and began to unweave the spells. It took an hour. Each layer of magic peeled away like skin, revealing older, deeper enchantments beneath. Some he recognized, standard royal preservation, physical protection, spiritual barriers. But others were new, woven in patterns he'd never seen. Alara's work, done in those final moments before the hunters reached her. When the last ward fell away, Alaric paused. His hand rested on the cold stone lid. Beyond this point, there was no going back. Whatever lay inside would become truth, immutable and permanent. He pushed. The lid moved easier than it should have, sliding open with barely a whisper of stone against stone. The preservation spells should have sealed it tight, should have required tremendous force to break. But it opened like it had been waiting for him. Alaric looked inside. Empty. Not just empty, impossibly so. No body, no bones, no remnants of cloth or jewelry or any physical trace that Alara had ever been placed here. Just a thin layer of ash scattered across the bottom of the coffin, fine as powder, gray as morning mist. His breath caught. He reached out with shaking fingers, touching the ash. It was warm. Not hot, but distinctly warm, as though something had been burning here recently. The moment his skin made contact, Light erupted from the residue, soft, golden, pulsing in a rhythm he recognized. A heartbeat. "What did you do?" he whispered. The light intensified, and suddenly he wasn't standing in the crypt anymore. He was somewhere else, nowhere, everywhere. A space between spaces, filled with Alara's presence so strongly he could almost touch her. "You finally looked," her voice echoed, not with sound but with feeling. "I was beginning to think you'd leave me sealed forever." "Alara?" His voice broke on her name. Not quite. Just an echo. A recording left in case you needed to understand. There was sadness in the resonance, but also peace. "The girl found you." "Good. I wasn't sure the guidance would work." "What happened to you? Where's your body?" "I gave it up." The presence moved around him like wind. The soul transference spell, it's not meant for infants. Their spirits are too new, too undefined. It would have destroyed her, trying to anchor something so fragile to pure magic. Then how? "I became the anchor." The words carried weight, finality. "I poured my entire soul into the spell, used my body as fuel for the magic." Physical form traded for spiritual preservation. When I died, the spell completed. My soul split. Most of it transferred into our daughter's body, giving her the strength to survive. But I kept a fragment back. Just enough to guide her, to help her find her way home when the time was right. Alaric's legs gave out. He collapsed beside the coffin, ash smearing across his hands. "You sacrificed everything. I saved everything that mattered." There was fierce joy in those words. "Our daughter lives, Alaric. Truly lives. Not as a vampire, not as a ghost, but as herself. Human, whole, free. Everything we wanted for her. But you're gone." I was dead either way. Gentleness now like a hand on his cheek. The hunter's blade was poisoned. Even if I'd survived the attack, the wound would have killed me within hours. I chose to spend those hours giving our child a future instead of clinging to minutes I'd already lost. The light pulsed brighter, and Alaric felt warmth spread through his chest. The sensation of being held, being loved, being seen completely. "The fragment in 7 is almost gone now," Alara's echo continued. "Once you understood the truth, once you accepted what happened, there was nothing left to teach her.
She knows who she is.
She knows she's loved. That's all I needed to give her." "I'm not ready to lose you again," Alaric said, tears streaming down his face.
"You're not losing me."
I'm in her laugh, her stubbornness, her courage. Every time you look at her, you'll see pieces of us both. The presence began to fade, the light dimming. "Protect her, Alaric. Finish what we started. Give her the life we dreamed about. The council wants her dead. Then teach them why that would be the greatest mistake they ever make." The last whisper of presence wrapped around him like an embrace. "I love you. I loved you. I will always have loved you. Now let me rest." The light went out. Alaric knelt in darkness beside an empty coffin filled with cooling ash, and finally, let himself grieve. Alaric found 7 exactly where he'd left her, sitting cross-legged on his bed, staring out the window at the pre-dawn darkness. She didn't turn when he entered, but he saw her shoulders relax slightly, acknowledging his presence. "You opened the coffin," she said quietly. "How did you know?" "I felt it." Like something letting go, 7 finally looked at him, and her eyes were different.
Clearer.
Less haunted by something she couldn't name. "She's gone now, isn't she? Really gone?" Alaric crossed the room and sat beside her, suddenly exhausted. "The fragment that guided you, yes. It faded when I understood the truth." "I thought I'd be scared," 7 said, pulling her knees to her chest. "I've heard her voice my whole life. In my dreams, in quiet moments, sometimes just in feelings that told me which way to go. Now it's just silent." She tilted her head, considering. "But it's not a bad silent. It's like finishing a story. You're sad it's over, but you're glad you got to hear it." "She used her entire soul to save you," Alaric said. "Burned away her physical form to give you life." 7 absorbed this, her young face solemn.
"So, I'm not her reborn."
I'm not Queen Alara trapped in a child's body.
No.
I'm just me, her daughter, who happened to carry a piece of her for a while. Yes. Seven nodded slowly, processing. At the orphanage, I always felt wrong. Like I was supposed to be somewhere else, supposed to be someone else. The other children could tell too. They said I was strange. Too quiet, too weird, too different. She looked at her hands, at the blood sigil that still glowed faintly on her wrist. I thought maybe I was broken. Maybe the dreams meant I was going crazy. You were never broken, Alaric said firmly. I know that now. Seven met his eyes. She wasn't trying to possess me or control me. She was just teaching me, showing me where I came from so I'd understand where I belonged. A small smile crossed her face. She showed me you arguing with her once. You were mad because she'd rearranged your study without asking. You said she was the most stubborn woman in the kingdom. Despite everything, Alaric felt his lips twitch. She was. And she said you were the most dramatic vampire she'd ever met, and that was saying something. Seven's smile widened. You both laughed after. She kissed you and said she'd never change your study again, and you said you didn't believe her, and she said you were right not to. The memory hit Alaric like a physical thing, that exact argument, that exact moment. How had he forgotten the laughter? He'd been carrying only the grief for so long, he'd lost the joy beneath it. She wanted you to know she was happy, Seven said softly. Even when things got scary, even when she knew she might die, she was happy because she had you and she had me coming. She said that was more than most people got in a whole lifetime. Alaric's throat tightened. I failed to protect her. She didn't think so. She thought you were brave and strong and exactly who she needed. Seven reached out and took his hand. She also thought you'd blame yourself forever, which is why she made sure I'd survive to tell you to stop it. Did she actually say that? Not in words, but I could feel it. Like instructions woven into the magic. Find him. Help him understand. Make him smile again, that sort of thing. They sat in silence for a moment, watching the sky begin to lighten at the horizon. Dawn was coming. In hours, the council would return with their verdict. Alaric had no illusions about what it would be. He'd seen the fear in their eyes, the calculations behind their concern. Seven was a problem that needed solving, and they'd chosen the simplest solution. What happens now? Seven asked. They're still going to try to kill me, aren't they? Not while I draw breath. But you can't fight the whole council. You can't protect me forever, she said it matter-of-factly, without fear or accusation. They're scared. I understand that. I'm something that shouldn't exist. Magic that breaks rules they think are important. Those rules were written by people who never imagined love could find loopholes in death itself, Alaric said fiercely. You're not an abomination. You're a miracle. Miracles still scare people when they don't understand them. Alaric stood, pacing to the window. Beyond the castle walls, he could see the first hints of sunrise painting the clouds. Somewhere out there, hunters were moving closer. Inside these walls, politicians were sharpening their arguments. And here, in his private chambers, sat a 6-year-old girl who spoke with the wisdom of someone who'd carried a queen's soul fragment for her entire short life. You're right, he admitted. Fear makes people dangerous. But so does love. And I loved your mother with everything I am. I love you with everything I'm becoming. He turned to face her. If the council won't protect you, I'll find another way. What way? Alaric's jaw set with determination. The riskiest, most public, most binding way possible. One that will force every vampire in this kingdom to choose, stand with their king and his daughter, or declare themselves traitors to the crown. Seven's eyes widened slightly. That sounds dangerous. It is. But your mother didn't sacrifice herself, so we could hide you away like a shameful secret. Alaric extended his hand. Are you ready to show them exactly what a miracle looks like? Seven took his hand without hesitation. Yes. The betrayal came an hour before the council was scheduled to reconvene. Alaric was in the armory with Commander Vale, selecting ceremonial blades for the public blood rite he planned to perform, when a young messenger burst through the doors. Her face was pale, her hands shaking. Your Majesty, the Eastern Tower. There's been an attack. Alaric's blood went cold. 7. Safe. Your personal guard got her to the vault in time. But the attackers knew exactly where she'd be. They went straight to your chambers, bypassed 3 security checkpoints like they had a map. Vale was already moving, his sword drawn. How many? 5 that we've captured. But, Your Majesty, the messenger hesitated, her voice dropping to a horrified whisper. They're wearing our uniforms. They're our own guards. The armory spun for a moment. Alaric gripped the edge of a weapon rack to steady himself. Take me to them.
Now.
The captured traitors were being held in the lower dungeons, iron chains binding them to walls that had held enemies of the crown for centuries. Alaric recognized 3 of them, men who'd served his household for years, who'd sworn oaths of loyalty, who'd stood at attention during Alara's funeral with what he'd thought was genuine grief. Who sent you? Alaric demanded, his voice echoing off stone. The oldest guard, a vampire named Garrett, kept his eyes on the floor. No one sent us, Your Majesty. We acted on our own. Lies. Alaric's hand shot out, grabbing Garrett's chin and forcing eye contact. You knew exactly where to find her. You knew which passages to take, which guards to avoid. Someone gave you information. We were protecting the kingdom, Garrett said stubbornly. That child is a violation of everything we stand for. She's my daughter. She's an abomination. Another guard spat the words. Human filth carrying stolen vampire magic. The queen perverted sacred rituals too. Alaric's fist connected with the guard's jaw before he could finish. Bone cracked. The guard slumped unconscious against his chains. Anyone else want to speak ill of their queen? Alaric's voice was deadly quiet. Silence. Vale moved closer to Garrett. The messenger said you bypass checkpoints. That requires command codes. Codes only council members and senior officers possess. Garrett's jaw clenched. Tell me who, Alaric ordered. Tell me which council member orchestrated this, and I'll make your deaths quick. Lord Coffin, Garrett said finally, the name dropping like a stone. He approached us 2 days ago. Said the child was too dangerous to let live. Said the king had been compromised by grief and couldn't see clearly. Said if we acted before the council session, before the public blood right, we'd be heroes. Alaric's hands began to shake with barely controlled rage.
Coffin.
A vampire who'd served on the council for 4 centuries. Who'd advised Alaric's father, who'd stood beside him during the war, who'd offered condolences at Alara's funeral with tears in his ancient eyes. Where is he now? Alaric asked. Gone, Vale said grimly. I sent guards to his chambers the moment we knew there were traitors. His rooms are empty. Personal effects cleared out. He left sometime in the night. He's not working alone, Alaric realized. This was coordinated. While I was distracted with the council's official threats, Coffin was making his own plans. There's more, Your Majesty. Vale pulled a sealed letter from his coat. We found this in Coffin's study. It's addressed to the Blood Moon clan. Alaric tore it open. His eyes scanned the contents, each word stoking his fury higher. The weak king shelters a forbidden vessel in direct violation of the Treaty of Nightfall. He plans to legitimize this abomination through public blood right. If you move now, while his forces are divided, the capital is yours. I will open the southern gates at midnight. He's inviting invasion, Alaric said, his voice hollow. He's selling out the entire kingdom to destroy one child. The Blood Moon clan has been waiting for an excuse like this, Vale said. With proof of treaty violation and an insider's help, they could rally other clans to their cause. We'd be facing a united vampire front. Not just vampires, Alaric thought of the hunters, surely drawing closer with every passing hour. If the clans attack from one side and hunters attack from the other, we'd be crushed between them. A guard ran into the dungeon, breathing hard. Commander, the watchtowers report movement on the eastern border. Large force moving fast. They're not trying to hide. It's like they want us to see them coming. Hunters, Alaric said. Right on schedule. And our scouts just confirmed Blood Moon forces gathering to the south. Another messenger arrived, her face grim. They'll reach the capital by nightfall. Alaric looked at Vale. How many loyal soldiers do we have? Maybe 200 who we can absolutely trust. Another 300 who'll probably follow orders if they come from you directly. Beyond that, Vale shook his head. Cashin's been poisoning minds for days. Half the guard thinks the child should die. The other half doesn't know what to think. Then we give them something to think about. Alaric turned toward the dungeon stairs, his decision made. Gather everyone in the main courtyard. Soldiers, servants, council members, citizens from the lower city. I want witnesses. Hundreds of them. Your Majesty, if you perform the blood right now, you'll be painting a target. The target's already there, Alaric interrupted. We're surrounded by enemies who think we're weak, divided, easy prey. Time to show them exactly how wrong they are. The courtyard filled within the hour. Word had spread through the castle like wildfire. The king was making a proclamation. Something about the strange child. Something that would change everything. People came from every corner of the capital, driven by curiosity, loyalty, or the simple human need to witness history being made. Alaric stood on the raised platform normally reserved for executions and coronations, acutely aware of the symbolism. Seven stood beside him, her small hand gripping his with surprising strength. Below them, a sea of faces, vampire and human servants, guards with uncertain expressions, council members watching with varying degrees of horror and calculation, and citizens who'd braved the growing tension to see their king. Beyond the walls, Alaric could hear the distant sounds of approaching forces. The Blood Moon clan from the south. Hunters from the east. A vice closing slowly, giving him just enough time to make this choice. People of the realm. Alaric's voice carried across the courtyard, amplified by magic. 5 years ago, I lost everything. My wife. My unborn child. My future. He paused, letting the words settle. I thought the story ended there. That grief was all I had left to offer this kingdom. The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. But my wife, your queen, was smarter than any of us knew. In her final moments, facing certain death, she didn't surrender. She didn't accept fate. She broke every rule, violated every ancient law, and performed magic so forbidden that its very existence should have been impossible. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. She saved our daughter. Alaric placed his hand on Seven's shoulder. This child stands before you carrying royal blood and royal magic. She is human, yes, but she is also mine. She is Alara's final gift to me, to all of us. Proof that love can triumph over death itself. She's a violation of the treaty, someone shouted from the crowd. The treaty forbids forced possession. Alaric shot back. It forbids vampires using humans as disposable vessels for immortality. My wife didn't possess this child. She saved her, protected her, gave her life at the cost of her own. That's not possession. That's sacrifice. Lord Cashin's voice cut through the crowd. Alaric spotted him near the back, surrounded by guards wearing his house colors. The traitor hadn't run far. He'd been gathering his own forces, waiting for this exact moment. Sacrifice doesn't change what she is, Cashin called out. A hybrid abomination that will bring war to our doorstep. War is already at our doorstep. Alaric gestured toward the walls. The Blood Moon clan masses to the south. Hunters approach from the east. Not because of this child, because they sense weakness. Because they believe we're broken, leaderless, easy prey. He drew his ceremonial blade, the silver gleaming in the afternoon sun. I will not let them be right. The crowd pressed closer, sensing something momentous. For centuries, royal succession has been determined by blood, Alaric continued. Not by council vote, not by popular opinion, but by the unbreakable bond of the royal bloodline. He held up his left wrist, where his own blood sigil still glowed faintly. This child carries that bond. She carries the queen's essence, my magical signature, and the right to stand as heir to this throne. She's human. Cashin pushed through the crowd, his face twisted with rage. She'll die in decades. What kind of succession is that? The kind that proves we're more than just immortal monsters clinging to power, Alaric said quietly. My daughter will rule differently than I have. She'll bridge worlds we've kept separate for too long. She'll show that strength comes not from how long you live, but from what you do with the time you have. He turned to Seven. Are you ready? Seven nodded, her face pale but determined. Alaric knelt, bringing himself to her eye level. This will hurt. The magic will burn as it settles. Once it's done, there's no going back. You'll be bound to this throne, this crown, this responsibility for the rest of your life. I know, Seven said. Mother prepared me. The crowd watched in absolute silence as Alaric took Seven's hand. He pressed the ceremonial blade to his palm, drawing blood that shimmered with ancient power. Then, with infinite gentleness, he made a matching cut on Seven's palm. By blood and magic, Alaric intoned, his voice resonating with ritual power. By crown and covenant, by rite of sacrifice and love, I name you heir to the throne. I bind you to the royal line, now and forever.
What was split shall be joined.
What was hidden shall be known. What was questioned shall be answered. He pressed their bleeding palms together. Light exploded from the contact point, brilliant, blinding, impossible to look at directly. Seven gasped, her small body rigid as magic poured into her. The blood sigils on both their wrists blazed like stars, the patterns shifting and reforming, creating new connections that had never existed before. The crowd shielded their eyes. Even Cashin stepped back, his expression wavering between fear and fury. When the light faded, Seven stood taller somehow. Her eyes glowed with a faint red sheen that would mark her as royal for the rest of her life. The blood sigil on her wrist had transformed, no longer Alara's protective spell, but something new. A mark that proclaimed her heir to the vampire throne, recognized by magic itself. Behold, Alaric said, his voice carrying to every corner of the courtyard. Princess Seven, my daughter, your future queen. And then, right on cue, the first explosion rocked the southern wall. The Blood Moon clan had arrived. The chaos erupted. The southern wall buckled under a second blast of magic. Stone cracked and crumbled, creating a breach wide enough for enemy forces to pour through. The Blood Moon clan's war cry echoed across the courtyard, a sound like thunder mixed with screaming wind. To arms! Commander Vale's voice cut through the panic. Loyal guards formed defensive lines while civilians scrambled for shelter. Alaric pulled Seven close, scanning for the safest route to. No, Seven said firmly, resisting his grip. You need to fight. I'll slow you down. I'm not leaving you. Commander Vale will protect me. Seven looked up at him with those eerily calm eyes. This is what you trained for. What the kingdom needs. Go. Alaric hesitated, torn between king and father. She's right, your majesty, Vale said, already positioning guards around them. We'll get her to the vault. You need to lead the defense or we'll be overrun in minutes. Another explosion. This time from the eastern gates. The hunters had coordinated their attack perfectly with the Blood Moon assault. 2 fronts, maximum chaos. Overwhelming force. Alaric looked at 7-1 last time. Stay alive. That's an order. You too, Seven said, and there was something in her voice, a weight, a knowing, that made him pause.
But there was no time.
He vaulted off the platform, drawing his sword as he ran toward the southern breach. Behind him, Vale swept Seven into his arms and headed for the castle's interior, a dozen guards forming a protective ring around them. The battle was brutal. Blood Moon warriors flooded through the breach, their armor painted with clan symbols that marked them as elite fighters. They'd been planning this for weeks, Alaric realized. Cashin's betrayal had just given them the perfect timing. He cut down 3 enemies in the first 30 seconds, his vampire speed making him a blur of motion and steel. Around him, his forces rallied, drawing strength from their king's presence on the battlefield. But they were outnumbered, and more enemies kept coming. To the east, he could hear the clash of iron against iron, the hunters engaging his guards at the gates. Fighting on two fronts was suicide. They couldn't hold both positions. Fall back to the inner courtyard, Alaric ordered. Controlled retreat. Defensive positions. His forces began pulling back, maintaining formation even as they gave ground. It was the right tactical choice, but it felt like failure. Like losing Alara all over again, watching something precious slip through his fingers while he was powerless to stop it. In the vault deep beneath the castle, Seven sat quietly while battle raged above. The thick walls muffled the sounds of fighting, but she could still feel it. Vibrations in the stone, distant thunder of collapsing walls, the weight of violence pressing down from above. Commander Vale paced near the door, checking and rechecking their defenses. The vault has held for 1,000 years, he said, more to himself than to her. It'll hold now. Seven nodded, but she wasn't thinking about the vault. She was thinking about the emptiness inside her chest. The silence where her mother's voice used to be. Ever since the blood rite, since Alaric had bound her fully to the royal line, that last connection to Alara had been fading. Like a candle burning down to nothing. She could feel it now, the final flicker. The last trace of soul fragment that had guided her for 6 years. It's time, a familiar voice whispered. Not in her ears, but in her heart. Mother. Seven whispered. I stayed as long as I could, little one. But the magic is complete now. You're his daughter, officially. You're safe. I can finally rest. I don't want you to go. I know. But I've already gone, sweet girl. This is just the echo saying goodbye. Warmth flooded through Seven. The sensation of being held, being loved unconditionally. You were so brave. Everything I hoped you'd be. Tears streamed down Seven's face.
I'm scared.
Of the battle. Of forgetting you. Of losing even the memory of your voice. You won't forget. The presence wrapped around her like a blanket. Every time you make a hard choice with kindness, that's me. Every time you stand up for someone who can't stand up for themselves, that's me. Every time you look at your father and make him smile, that's me. I'm woven into who you are now. The spell worked exactly as I hoped. Tell him. Seven's voice broke. Tell him I love him. Tell him not to blame himself anymore. He knows. He's always known. A pause, then Seven listened carefully. When you leave this vault, the battle will still be raging. Your father will be hurt, not badly, but enough to slow him down. There will be a moment when everything balances on a single choice. What choice? You'll know it when you see it. Trust yourself.
Trust what I taught you.
The warmth began to fade, like sunrise burning away morning mist. I'm so proud of you. I'm so grateful I got to guide you, even for a little while. Be happy, my darling girl.
Be brave.
Be kind. Be everything I knew you could be. Mother, wait. I love you. Now and forever.
Tell your father the same.
The presence vanished. Seven collapsed, the sudden absence hitting like a physical blow. Vale rushed to her side, catching her before she hit the floor. Princess. What's wrong? Seven looked up at him, tears still streaming, but she was smiling. A real smile, full of grief and love and peace all tangled together. She's gone, Seven said softly. Mother's really gone now. She can finally sleep. Above them, the battle raged on. The battle turned at dawn. Not through overwhelming force or tactical brilliance, but through something far simpler. Witnesses. The civilians who'd gathered for Alaric's blood declaration hadn't fled when the fighting started. They'd taken shelter, yes, but they'd also watched. They'd seen their king fight beside common guards. They'd seen him pull wounded soldiers to safety. They'd seen him stand between the enemy and his people, again and again, refusing to retreat. And when Seven emerged from the vault, against Vale's protests, following an instinct she couldn't name, they saw something else entirely. A small girl with glowing eyes walking calmly through a battlefield, heading straight for her father. Alaric was injured, just as Alara's echo had predicted. A hunter's blessed blade had caught his side, the wound burning with holy magic that prevented rapid healing. He'd fallen to one knee, struggling to raise his sword as 3 Blood Moon warriors closed in for the kill. 7 reached him first. She didn't have weapons, didn't have combat training, didn't have anything except 6 years of her mother's guidance and a choice that balanced on the edge of a knife. "Stop," she said. Her voice shouldn't have carried over the chaos, shouldn't have made battle-hardened warriors pause mid-strike. But it did. The blood sigil on her wrist blazed with light, not threatening, not violent, just present. Undeniable. "I am Princess Seven," she said, louder now. "Daughter of Queen Alara and King Alaric, heir to this throne. And I order you to stop this pointless killing." One of the Blood Moon warriors laughed. A human child giving orders? The king has truly gone mad. Has he? 7 gestured to the battlefield around them. "Look at what you're fighting for. Lord Coffin promised you an easy victory over a weak, divided kingdom. Where is he now?" Silence. Everyone looked around. Coffin was nowhere to be seen. He'd fled the moment the fighting started, leaving his allies to die for his ambitions. "You were told I was an abomination," 7 continued. "A violation of sacred law. But the blood rite was witnessed by hundreds. The magic itself recognized me as royal. If I'm such a violation, why did the ancient spells accept me?" A hunter pushed through the Blood Moon lines, his armor marked with the symbol of a high captain. Marcus Thorne, 7 realized, recognizing him from her mother's warnings. The man who'd been tracking her for weeks. "The Treaty of Nightfall is clear," Marcus said, his voice hard. "Sole possession of humans is forbidden." "Then it's fortunate that I'm not possessed," 7 said calmly. "I'm not a vampire soul trapped in a human body. I'm a human child who was protected by vampire magic. My mother gave her life to save mine. Is sacrifice now considered a crime? The magic you carry is mine by birth, not theft. Royal blood flowed through my veins from the moment I was conceived. My mother simply ensured that blood survived when everything else was lost." 7 stepped forward, placing herself between Marcus and her father. "If you want to kill me for existing, then do it. But know that you'll be executing a child whose only crime was surviving, and history will remember you accordingly." Marcus stared at her, his hand on his weapon. Around them, the fighting had stopped. Everyone was watching this confrontation, vampire and hunter alike, waiting to see how this impossible moment resolved. "She's right," someone said from the crowd. A Blood Moon warrior, young but clear-eyed. "This isn't what we came here for. We came to stop a treaty violation. But there's no possession here. Just a father protecting his daughter. She's human," another warrior protested weakly. "So?" The young warrior sheathed his sword. "Since when do we kill children for being born different?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Marcus Thorne looked at 7 for a long moment. Then he looked at Alaric, still kneeling, wounded but defiant. Finally, he looked at the faces surrounding them, civilians, guards, enemies who'd come for battle but found something else instead. "Stand down," Marcus ordered his forces. "We came to enforce the treaty, not to massacre families." The hunters lowered their weapons. The Blood Moon warriors, seeing their allies retreat, began doing the same. Not all of them. Some still snarled defiance, still hungry for the fight. But enough. Enough that the battle drained away like water through cupped hands. 3 weeks later, the southern wall had been rebuilt, stronger than before. The treaty negotiations had taken days, new accords, new understandings, new definitions that accounted for magic born of sacrifice rather than conquest. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Alara's coffin remained sealed in the royal crypt, no longer guarded by grief, but by gratitude. Alaric visited sometimes, but not to mourn, to remember, to thank her for the future she'd made possible. 7 spent her days in lessons, diplomacy, languages, history, combat training. Not as a weapon, but as someone who would one day need to navigate between worlds that had been separate for too long. She was good at it, discovering talents for negotiation and bridge building that came naturally. Some nights, Alaric would find her staring out windows, that distant look in her eyes. "Do you miss her?" he'd ask. "Every day," Seven would answer honestly. But she's not really gone. She's just different now. In me.
In you.
In the choices we make, because she taught us how. And Alaric would smile, truly smile, because his daughter was right. The queen could finally rest. And the kingdom could finally heal.